I really hope you've had a good time at the conference. Everybody's been telling us that there's been an extraordinary feeling of very positive energy that they have never felt at a lot of other conferences they've gone to. They've not felt that. And they said they can feel it here, and it's something very tangible. Even the vendors said they weren't even caring if they sold anything or not. It was just, I don't know how true that is, but they said it was just the feeling of this whole thing was just so high energy. And we've had some really wonderful speakers. Okay. This is our first one, so I guess we're going to have to make it a tradition now and do it again next year. Okay. Well, it'd be here, but a lot of people are saying maybe we should go on the road and have it in other cities with the same speakers. But, you know, that'd be hard to do. It's hard enough to put it right here where we live. But I know we have a lot of other authors that we have not even asked to speak yet, and I have more coming up, so I know we have plenty of speakers. Plus, I know everybody on the lecture circuit. So it's not going to be hard to find people if we want to continue to do this. Okay, so it's an idea. I think we weren't sure how it was going to turn out, but now that it's finally done, I guess if I don't make a fool of myself tonight, it's finally done. And so I think we can do it again, but it is a lot of work. We started a year ago on this, and it takes that long to put everything together, and you're coming down to the wire. You never know at the last minute, or you're going to forget something. I spoke at hundreds and hundreds of conferences, but when you start doing it yourself, it's different from this side of the fence. You know? Okay, but we've had a lot of good cooperation too. Okay. I like to sit down. I guess I'm getting spoiled. I'm getting lazy. So I always like to sit down when I do my talks now. I was in Glastonbury a few years ago speaking at a crop circle conference. And it was like a theater. We were up on the stage, and I said, I'd like to have a nice, easy chair, you know, to sit up there. And they said, oh, we've got a good one for you. And they put it up on the stage, and it looked real good. It was nice and comfortable looking. I sat down in it, and I sank all the way to the bottom. Like it didn't have any springs or anything in it. And they brought a bunch of pillows and cushions in it, trying to prop it up. But I was sitting there the whole conference like this, you know. So I don't know what that would have looked like on a videotape. So I've had a lot of strange experiences when I do these talks anyway. Okay, I think most of you know who I am, I believe. Is there anybody who doesn't know me and my work? Oh, okay. Makes me feel good. Then I don't have to do as much background and everything. And we always get the skeptics and things that some of these, they don't believe it. They say, no, you're lying. You couldn't have done the things you've done, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's good to have a lot of people here who do know what I do and do know it's real. There's no way on earth I could fake the things I found and the things I write about. I consider myself the reporter, the investigator, the researcher of lost knowledge, because I soon found that the information I was getting was either lost, forgotten, or never known at all. And that's what I like to write about, the things that nobody knows, to get that back. And it began coming with my work. But I am a hypnotherapist, and I specialize in past life regression and past life therapy. But I started 40 years ago. So I've been doing this a long time, back in the 60s. I was doing it back the first time as a hypnotist back in the days when it was watch the shiny object. Remember those old methods, if there's anyone in the audience who is a hypnotherapist. and you had the long, drawn-out inductions. I always said you relax them from the big toe all the way up. And you had the tests that had to be performed. None of that is necessary, but it was the old methods of hypnosis. And that was the way I started out. And you know, the habits, stop smoking and lose weight. To me, that's so boring now. I'd much rather time travel. But if somebody comes to me and wants to stop smoking or lose weight, I'll tack it on to the session, but it's not the primary object. My object now is therapy and trying to help the person. And that, to me, is so easy to do the habits that I'd rather do the other type of therapy. But back in the 60s, I had so many things happen. I'm not going to go into the whole story. But in my last book, the Convoluted Universe, Book 2, I put in the first chapter the story of how it happened, because people kept saying, how did you get into this? What happened? And see, I've written 13 books, but actually I've written 14, because the first book has never been published. It was called 5 Lives Remembered, and that was how it all began in those early days, and told the story of how it all happened. And that was the first book I was trying to get published way back. Now when I speak at writers' conferences, I always tell them, don't expect your first book to be published. It may never be published. You have to keep writing more and more, and maybe one down the road will be the first one to come out. They think, oh, I've got this one book, but that one has never been published. I don't know if it ever will be. People say it should be because it tells the beginning. But to me now it seems so mundane and ordinary compared to the adventures I've had since then. But it does tell the story of how everything began. And that's why in the last book I decided in the first chapter I'll tell the story of how it all happened. I'm not going to go into it a lot, but I had to put everything on the back burner because my husband was almost killed. He was a Navy veteran of 21 years, and he was almost killed, and he ended up being in a wheelchair for 25 years. He was put out of the service, and when all that happened, we had to move, and we moved to Arkansas, of all places. But there's a whole story of went on in there, because my first exposure to reincarnation, past lives happened back in the 60s. But I had to put everything on the back burner when that happened to my husband. And he really shouldn't have lived because he was his body was crushed and his face was torn apart. And it ended up that he was in braces, he was partial amputee, and he went into a black depression where he didn't want anything to do with anybody for years. So we had a lot of rebuilding to do at that time. That's what who was it, OT or one of you were talking about, Justine, we all have our challenges. We all have the things we have to face. That's life. I don't think you can live very long without going through these things that you have to experience. That's what life's all about. The tests and the challenges and how do you come out of these things. Because when I do some lectures, especially on life after death, I tell people everyone has bad things that happen to them. But did you learn anything from it? If you learned even one thing, that was the reason for the whole experience. And I could do a lot of soul searching to find out what happened with mine, but it turned me into a completely different person. From a dependent, ordinary housewife taking care of 4 children and a husband in a wheelchair into what I do now. I would never have suspected it would have gotten into this. But that's all part of growing and changing. Some people tell me, they're not even my age, and they'll say, oh, my life is over. The children are all grown, they're gone. I don't have any life anymore. What am I going to do? I said, your life could take a 180-degree turn. You could be doing something you would never have thought of. Your life is just beginning because now you're free to do anything you want to do. And they don't think about it that way, because that's what happened to me. Mine went in a totally different direction. but it had a lot of bumps along the way. But anyway, I had to put the hypnosis and the past life regression and everything on the back burner when I moved here, because it was mostly concentrating on my husband and the family. And it was the 1970s, the end of the 70s, when I finally was able, the kids were grown, they were going off to college, they were getting married. Then it's like, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? The empty nest syndrome. I decided to do something different than what the average mother would do. I wanted to get back into hypnosis. I had been exposed in the 60s to reincarnation, past life regression, and it was so startling because there was nothing out at that time except for the search for Bridey Murphy. No books to tell you how to do any of this. But to me, it was time travel, and that's what I wrote about in the first book. It was so life-changing, I couldn't forget about it. I'd opened a door to the unknown, and I wanted to get back to that. So in the 1970s, when the kids began leaving, and what was I going to do, I wanted to get back into past life regression. I didn't want to do the normal hypnosis anymore. But I knew there had to be an easier way. The old methods were too long, too slow. So I began studying the newer methods. And now it was being done with visualization and imagery. So I started doing that. But I've been doing this now, this would be about 30 years when I started in the 70s until where I'm at now. As I began doing it, I began seeing some of the things in hypnosis were not needed. And I thought, why don't I try this instead? And I found that as long as you're not harming the client, my first thing I've always emphasized is the care and protection of the client that I'm working with. If you're not going to harm the client, why not try something that's different? Because somebody in the beginning had to have invented the ways of doing this anyway. Somebody had to start out somewhere. Why do the long, drawn-out things and all of the other unnecessary things? So as I began doing it, I began dropping things and adding things. And this is why over the 30 years, I've developed my own technique. And it has been proving to have astounding results, because I'm now able to have contact with the subconscious mind. I call it the subconscious, but it's more like OT has talked about. It is the oversoul, the higher self, the higher consciousness, whatever you want to call it. Through the technique, I've been able to tap into that part. Now, in normal hypnosis, they're able to talk to the subconscious by hand movements. They'll say, raise one finger for yes or one for no, which is very slow and time-consuming. Why do that when you can have the subconscious talk back to you and give you the answers? But now I'm teaching this to psychiatrists and psychologists all over the world. They said, we never thought of that. They didn't think it was possible to do that. But that's where the answers are. All of the answers are in this higher self. Why not go to the part that has all of the answers and get it from them? But what I was doing in the beginning was just, I called time travel. I was taking people back into the past lives. And in Arkansas, people kept saying, where were you finding your clients? I never had to look for clients. And I live on a mountaintop over here by Huntsville. They were coming to me out of nowhere. And the ones in the beginning were supplying the most fascinating stories. Because part of this technique that I developed, I work in the somnambulistic level, which is the deepest possible level of trance. Most hypnotists stay in the lighter levels of trance. Have any of you ever had a past life regression?
Yes.
I know you have. You were my last client a few days ago. Okay. But the ones of you who have had the past life regressions, did you remember everything that happened in them? Because if you did, that's the lighter levels of trance. A lot of hypnotists won't go any deeper than that because they're afraid of it. They've told me they were taught, don't mess with the somnambulistic level. Strange things happen there. And if you read my books, you know strange things happen there. But they've been taught to leave it alone. But if you go deeper, the deeper the person goes, the conscious mind detaches more and more. Because in the beginning, the conscious mind is there saying, you're making this up, this is silly, you read it in a book, you saw it in a movie, yuck, yuck, yuck. Well, if you can cut out the conscious mind and go direct to this other part, look at what you can get. You'll have any of the conscious mind interference. But the deepest possible level is the somnambulistic level. Now, twice a day, all of you go through that level. You must. You go through that level when you're going to sleep at night and when you're waking up in the morning. You pass through the somnambulistic level. The only thing I do is keep the person there at that level so we can get to the answers and get the results. The odds are, according to the hypnosis experts, I love to prove the experts wrong in my work anyway, but they say 1 out of 20 or 1 out of 30 will automatically go into the somnambulistic level when you're doing hypnosis work. Well, in the technique I developed, the opposite is true. 1 out of 20 or 1 out of 30 will not go. That's when I have to work harder. But I've not found anyone that couldn't be hypnotized and taken to a past life. The ones that are more difficult are the businessmen, the ones who were over there calculating part of their mind. One of the hardest ones I had was a math professor. He had to analyze everything I asked him before he could come up with an answer. They're the ones that live in that part of their mind. Mathematicians, professors, engineers, you can still do it, but you have to work harder. And that's what I'm teaching now is my technique. And I prove that everyone, there's no such thing as a bad subject. No matter what anyone has told you, there's only bad hypnotists that don't know what they're doing. It's easier to blame you. You weren't cooperating. You don't know what you're doing. But I have found everyone, I've done thousands and thousands of people now since I began 30 years ago. I have not found anyone who has not had a past life. And I think that should be something for the skeptics. Because sometimes I have skeptics at the conference, at the lectures I give. I tell them, what does the scientist do? They repeat experiments, don't they, over and over? And if they get the same results again and again, that's supposed to be scientific proof. What's the difference if I could do this thousands and thousands of times and get the same results? Isn't that proof? That should be considered with the scientific community. I think it would be. Of course, we're always bucking religion and all of that too. But anyway, I developed the technique and I began using it. And in the beginning, the ones who were finding me and coming to me, we were getting these fascinating stories because when you go into the somnambulistic level and we time travel to another life, they become the other personality totally. This lifetime disappears. They don't remember anything that's going on in this life. They are in that life. That's why I've been able to write the books from the viewpoint of the person who was there. If something doesn't exist in that time period but exists in ours, they don't even know what you're talking about. That's how much they are immersed in that other life. And the first story I got was Jesus and the Essenes, which is still my favorite. That is translated now in about 20 different languages. I just came from Russia, where my books are being translated over there, and the Russian version came off the press while I was there. I said, I got a new baby, because all of the books, to me, it's like I've created something that's taken on a life of its own and is out there doing and multiplying and growing, and it's spreading everywhere. That, to me, is unbelievable. that what you can do, because objects and things they do take on a life of their own, and it is spreading everywhere. We have about 4 other countries, I believe, isn't it, that are translating right now. Right before we left for the conference, the Chinese translation of Keepers in the Garden arrived. Now, they said they're going into Chinese. So I don't know where I'm going to be traveling next year. I like to go where the books are coming out. But look at all of the people it's all being exposed to everywhere. I went to Bulgaria, it's been about 5 or 6 years ago, and when I spoke for 2 hours with these scientists and doctors, they said this would not be allowed. I would not even be allowed to talk about it, except that they said they can't talk about anything except what is taught in the university. And they were only taught what the Russian and the communists told them to teach, and so they had to stick very much within those rigid rules. But when I went to Bulgaria, it had just separated from the communists. And they were saying, when we were talking about this, they had never heard of using hypnosis in this way. And they said, we would not be allowed to even talk about this. And I said, would I get in trouble? And they said, no, because you're a foreigner. But for 2 hours, they questioned me about this because they didn't know about past lives. They didn't know about past life regression. And when I was there, I said it was the most fantastic experience. It was like being a rock star. When I got off the plane, I mean, we were mobbed with all of these reporters and everything. And they said because all of this was so new, they thought I was a healer at first, and they were bringing people out of the hospitals for me to heal, which is very, I mean, I kept saying, no, it's not what I do. But I had a press conference where it was like the president. I mean, I'd never been in a thing like that. So while I was there, they gave me an award. They said I was the first American and also the first foreigner to ever receive this award. And it was for the highest advancement in the research of psychic phenomena. And they made a document. It's called the Orpheus Award. And while I was there, they made a documentary. And they had me doing sessions and all of this, and they filmed it. Well, after I left, I didn't think anything more about it because the book was in Bulgarian, and this is why I went, because it was translated. It only sold for $2 a book, but so what? I mean, that's all these countries can afford. India's the same way. I figured, get the information out. I don't care about the money. Anyway, after I left, I was told about a year later, when they showed the documentary in Bulgaria, everybody called wanting to know more about this new form of therapy, past life regression. They wanted to know how could they do it. Well, it ended up, now it's being taught and practiced in Bulgaria. So I may have been responsible for starting a whole new form of therapy in that country. That's a very strange feeling. So you don't know how much influence you're going to have. You don't know going in somewhere what you're going to do. My son didn't want me to go. He said, Mom, look at the map. You're going to go to Sofia, which is just across the border from Yugoslavia, where they were having, the war was going on. But you go where you feel led to and where you feel right about. And that's what I did. And now I just came back from New Delhi, India, where I spoke at the World Hypnosis Congress there. And then I went to Moscow, where we're working with these doctors I spoke of earlier. And I taught my class with a translator. We had several psychiatrists in the class, and they said they were aching to try this new form of therapy. So I don't know, it's like it's growing, and I feel to be a part of this. 20 years ago, they wouldn't even believe this. They kept saying it's just for New Age kooks. But now they're all wanting to learn it. I think that's in itself is an advancement. Like we said during the panel, things are changing, things are growing. They're willing to accept this now. And they want me to return to Russia to make sure that the doctors are using it correctly. So I don't know, my life is going in so many different strange directions. But still, I come back here and I like to live on my mountaintop and get away from all of that and be normal for a change. Nobody there knows what I do and nobody cares. And they leave you alone. You got to have a balance. You got to have a way to get into the two worlds. I live in two worlds. That world and this world that is so-called normal. But I have an office now in Huntsville. I had to because there were just so many people wanting sessions. I don't want anyone to come to my house. Like Justine says, she does it in her home, but I don't want people coming to find me because there are just too many. We get calls all day and all night, and we have mail from all over the world. And now I opened my office there, and they are coming from all over the world to have sessions. I don't encourage that because that's a long way, but they are doing it because they want help. So that's why I began teaching the classes so that other people can be doing this and spreading it. I'm just one person. My friends keep saying you need to be cloned for everything you do. But I felt I had to start teaching people, and hopefully they would be able to take the method and use it. And they are telling me, they're calling me. We have some here. I don't know if you're still here or not. They said they've taken the class back there. Jody, you've taken it, and they're having results, aren't you? She said she's having results. And this is happening a lot of times. I'll go to a lecture and they'll say, it's working, it's real, and they are having results. I taught it in Dubai, I'm in the Middle East, before Christmas, and this one man had no hypnosis training, and he was begging me. He says, please let me in the class. I don't have any training, but I want to do this so bad. That is important, the passion. And that's why now I'm allowing people into the class if they have that passion, if they want to learn. That's better than the trained hypnotists sometimes because they're stuck in their training. I'll let him in the class, and I just got an email from him. He said he's done about 20 sessions, and he's having fantastic results. One woman he cured of throat cancer. And this is what I do. So I'm just finding out it's spreading, they can do it, and it's working. That, to me, it makes me feel so good. All of them that take the class are not going to be able to do it. But if we can get some to spread it and get the information and help out there, because I can't do it all. There are just too many people. So anyway, I didn't want to go too much into the background. But the main thing I work on now, before it was past life regressions and the stories, Jesus and the Essenes, they walked with Jesus, A Soul Remembers Hiroshima. Those were all the lives that came out that were packed with information. But now, mostly what I focus on is the past life therapy. 90% of what I do is the therapy to help people. And everyone that comes has problems or they're looking for something. They have to be motivated to come so far. One man came from China to do it. I had a woman just the other day come from England. They've come from France. They came from New Zealand. They're coming from everywhere. They got to be motivated to want help that bad. And I think that's part of it. But they always come with problems, and I work a lot with physical problems. Because like O.T. was saying, I agree with everything he said. I found that your mind controls your body and that you create the disease, the illness for some reason. You don't know this consciously, but it's on the other level that you have done it for some reason. And people say, I don't want to be sick. What do you mean? But you wouldn't be sick unless there was something you was for. I found that the subconscious, every illness, every ache, pain, every symptom of the body is the subconscious trying to give you a message, trying to get your attention, trying to tell you something. If you don't understand what it's trying to tell you, it gets worse. Still trying to get your attention. Then if you still don't pay attention to it, eventually it's going to go into an illness or a disease or something that's going to be a lot harder to get rid of. And I've found if I can get to the person before they're going to have surgery, we can help them. Because they, and I'm going to tell you who they are in a minute, they said once something has been taken out, we can't put it back. But if we can get to them before they're going to have surgery, we can keep them from having the operation, because then we find out, why did they get into this mess? Why did it get this far? And there's always a reason. And a lot of times it's not anything to do in this life. Sometimes it is if they've got a horrible marriage or family problems. Like I said a while ago, I found a lot of cancer, especially colon cancer, is suppressed anger. They can't talk about it, they just hold it in. It's anger at somebody or something, and you can't hold emotions inside of you. When you start holding emotions inside of you, it begins to eat away, and you become sick. You don't want to let it get to that point. So a lot of the things I found the same thing over and over, causing different types of disease, just like OT was saying. Certain parts of the body are affected in different ways. But if we can find out why are they angry, people carry so much garbage and baggage around with them that they need to get rid of. And that's part of what I do. I spend a lot of time with each client, and a lot of it is talking to them, finding out, about them, what's going on in their life. And it doesn't take much for them to start turning me into Mother Confessor. I can spend a couple of hours just letting them tell me about all their family problems and their husbands, and they're crying, and but it's good for them. I have to know what we're going to be working on. But people carry so much junk around with them, and that's what makes them sick, and it's also what perpetuates karma, because you've got to let it go. Otherwise, you're going to have to come back and do the same thing again with the same people. And they all say, no, I don't want to do that. And then I said, you better let it go. And it goes back to it was Aaron's book, where he says in there about karma, the quickest, but not necessarily the easiest way to get rid of karma. What is it? And some people say, to pay it back, do it back to them. That just keeps the wheel of karma going. The easiest, but not the quickest, but not the easiest, is to forgive. Let it go. You have to let it go. That's what you hang on to, and it creates more karma, also makes you sick. But I've had people tell me, I can't forgive them. You don't know what they did to me. But they're hurting themselves more than anything. I am going to get to the subjects that were in that fire, but I thought this would be important to talk about also. I had this one man. I never was able to work with him because he mostly just talked to me on the telephone. His wife was on the phone. He had cancer in just about every part of his body. Every time they would operate and get rid of cancer in one part of his body, it would move to another part of the body. And he just kept going on and on and on. And his wife was saying, can you help him? Can you do something? And I said, well, is he angry about anything? Is he having any problems in his life? And he said, oh, yes, it's my ex-wife. I hate her. She has the children. I can't see them. And he had all this rage against his ex-wife. You see what it was doing to him? And I said, well, you're going to have to forgive her and let it go. We all come into life with a contract to try to do the best we can with other people we owe karma to. I said, tear up the contract. Let it go. It's not doing any good. Cut them loose and tell them to go with love. Forgive them and let them go on. He said, I can't do that. If I do that, she has won. I said, she'll win if she kills you. But you see how it's something like that is so simple, but we don't realize it. But it is hard because we do bear grudges. We have revenge. We can't have to get back at them. All it does is make our life more miserable because we don't know what it's doing to us. So that's part of what I have to do, let them talk and let them find out what it is that they're looking for. And part of the therapy is to get them to release these things so that they can recover. But a lot of times you have to go, that's this life, but sometimes it's carried over from other lives. Maybe they've had a pattern where they've been with this same person through many, many lives, and they still haven't worked it out. Well, if it's been that long, I don't think they're going to work it out. It's better just to let it go. But sometimes we can take them back to another life to find out where this came from. That's the karma part. And we also take them back to find out physical ailments. And I could go on. I've talked at so many different lectures where I've spent the whole day talking about illnesses and where they come from in other past lives and the direct connections. And I talk about this in my classes too, so I don't want to go into too much of that. But we have found so many illnesses that go back to past lives. When you find what causes it, it goes away. Because if the subconscious is trying to give you a message, once the message has been delivered, there's no sense in keep trying to give you the message. Once you understand what's causing the problem, it disappears. And I have seen miraculous healings. And to me, that makes me feel so good. And I've gotten emails where they tell them, they go back to the doctors, and the doctors say, I have no explanation for this. Everything is gone. And they've taken them off the medication because they don't need it anymore. To me, that's so satisfying. I've had people right there in my office be healed instantaneously before they leave the office. And it shows how powerful your mind is once you understand, and it all falls into place. But when I'm doing the sessions, a strange phenomena began to happen. When I do it, the past life is one thing. A lot of hypnotists, that's where they stop. They do the past life and that's it. Afterwards, a person will say, well, it was interesting. I was in ancient Egypt. I was in ancient Rome. What does that have to do with me now? You have to tie it together. You have to find out, why did you see that past life? What is it having to do with you now? And that's where you get the therapy and the healings. Well, after I do that, that's when I use the technique to contact the subconscious mind, because the subconscious has all of the answers. And the person usually comes in with a whole list. I tell them, bring a list of questions, everything you want to find out. And when we get into the subconscious mind, we can ask all of these questions, and we can find the answers if it's appropriate. Sometimes it's not time for you to know the answers. In that case, I can't get the answers. But if it's time, they will tell you the answers to everything you want to know. So this is a very powerful form of therapy. But strange things began happening while I began doing this type of therapy, speaking to the subconscious. That's where the books are coming from, The Convoluted Universe. Because I call them they. To me, now it's like calling up an old friend on the phone. Now, I don't know how anyone could say this is fraud or hoax or made up, because through everybody I work with, the same thing happens. When I ask for the subconscious, it's always the same voice, the same way of wording it, and they always say the same things. They always talk about the person in the third person. And they can be pretty cruel sometimes. We'll say, well, finally I'm getting a chance to talk. It's about time. They haven't been listening to me. And it'd be like, well, I have had two lately where, and Julie's nodding her head back there. One man, he was so bad off. Anyway, usually the subconscious will do everything it can to help the person. It will heal them. It will give them advice, because it always says the same thing: we love you, and we will take care of you. Now, how can it be the same thing all the time if I haven't touched into something that is real? This one man, there's two really. The man told me he had stopped drinking. His smoking was so bad that his lungs were just shot, and he had gone for another healer who had helped his lungs. Well, he was telling me, I just want to have the session because, but he went back to smoking. I didn't know that. A lot of them say, well, I'm cured now, I can go back to the old habits. And he told me he wasn't drinking anymore. Well, the subconscious, I always says, is a blabbermouth. If you're going to lie to me or not tell me the truth, it will tell me the truth. And this one man, it was saying, he's lying to you. He hasn't quit drinking. He's still drinking, and he's still smoking. And we helped him once with the lungs, and it says, we're tired of it. We're not going to help him anymore if he won't make the effort. And I don't want to ever cross them. Their power is too great. I'd rather cooperate with them. I don't want to do something that's going to make them say, well, the heck with you. But imagine if they've tried all the person's life and they're not paying attention to them. They tried everything. And this is what they said to him. Well, we give you so many chances. Now that's it. Whatever happens now is in your own hands, but we're not going to help you anymore. Well, I told him that when he woke up. I said, you didn't tell me the truth, He said, well, how are you going to know the difference? But but it's up to him now. Is he going to stop smoking? Is he going to stop drinking? Because they have tried and tried and tried, and they'll say, it's a wasted life. Why should we bother? It's better for you just to get out of here. Well, this other one I did a few months ago, I'd even forgot about him because I do so many until my daughter, you said he got an email or a phone call? Phone call. This guy, now these are rare. These are rare because the majority of people get a lot of help and they're very loving. So when this happens, it's always like, why is the subconscious suddenly acting cruel? Well, this man, it kept saying, you have wasted your life. You have not done anything you were supposed to do. You're ruining everybody else's life. It was just a big mess. And he said, you're out of here. We're not going to help you anymore. And I sure wouldn't want it to say that to me. But it says he wasn't advancing. He was wasting his life. So they said, that's it. We're out of here. And I didn't think anything more about it till she got this phone call. And what did he say? He said that this friend, that what? His cousin called about something else. And he said when the man got home and started listening to the tape, he's suddenly changing. He said he's acting different toward people. He's trying to live his life in a different way. Maybe it shook him up. Maybe it scared him to where he's thinking, if they're going to give up on me, I better make some changes. But those are rare for it to do that. As a rule, it will help them and it will give you a great deal of information. But as I'm doing this all over the world, this is what began to get a little strange, is that sometimes at the end of the session, when I always ask for advice, or if I always say, if you got any last message or advice for the client before we wake up? Sometimes they'll come in and say, sometimes they'll yell at me, Dolores, okay, what now, And then they'll usually bawl me out, something I'm not doing that I was supposed to. They changed my diet. They got me off of Pepsi. I used to live on Pepsi. And that was an interesting thing because I was doing this in Las Vegas right after 9/11. I had about 10, I was in Laughlin, Nevada at the UFO conference. I had a whole bunch of clients and I was doing this one. And toward the end, they came in and yelled at me. Well, before that, we had been in Orlando, wasn't it, at the Universal Studios and all of that down there. And I was living on Pepsi. I never drank water. And I got dehydrated down there. I didn't know what it was, but my daughter, Julie, is a nurse, and she said, Mom, you're dehydrated. You got to drink water. I said, water? What's that? I don't drink water. And So she kept bawling me out about it. Anyway, I went directly the next few days to the conference in Laughlin. And I was doing this session with this woman. And toward the end of the session, when I asked, do you have a message before we leave or advice for Susan? They yelled at me. They said, Dolores. And okay. Now this is coming through this woman. I always wonder, what do they think when they get home and listen to these tapes? You know? They'll say, who was that? That wasn't me. And I said, okay, what is it? And they said, you're dehydrated. You've got to drink water. It's affecting your kidneys. Now, this lady didn't know anything about anything. And they said, oh, by the way, tell your daughter to call home. Her daughter's trying to get a hold of her. It's not an emergency, but just tell her to call home. Because my daughter was watching the book table. Anyway, then they go on, but they get your attention. So anyway, after it was over, I went down to the book table, and I was telling them, guess what they just said? And I told them, they said I was dehydrated. But you were there, weren't you, or was it Nancy? She goes, like, touche, you know. She said, you won't believe us, but you believe them. And then they said, well, they just said, too, to call home. Jackie's trying to get a hold of you. And she said, I just did. It wasn't anything serious. She just needed some money. But see, they even knew that. It was funny. But anyway, they kept on me every time we would have a session to make sure I was getting off of the Pepsi and I was getting onto water. And then they would check in my diet. You're to eat this, you're not to eat that. And one time during the session, they said, we saw you eat some beef last night, and we told you you're not supposed to do that. I said, well, it was just a little bit of beef that was in some soup, you know. But, but they said, they're always giving people diet information. They said what they're putting in the beef and the pork now is not good. And that they said when it gets into your body, it takes as long as 6 months to get this stuff out of your system. So they said to try to stay out of it or use organic as best you can. They said chicken and fish is better, but if you can get organic meat, that's the best of all. But the very best thing they suggest eating is live food, as they call it, which they mean fresh fruits and vegetables. And that's what they keep telling everyone that comes if they're having problems, and they'll say, well, it goes back to your diet. This is what you need to be eating. And they said the importance of water is beyond belief. We don't have any idea the importance of water, that there's things in the water that the body absolutely must have, and a lot of it is being taken out by the way the water is filtered and everything now. But they said the water is of the utmost importance to the body. Of course, it's of importance to the whole planet, too. They're concerned about all of that, too. But anyway, that's what they kept doing, and it took me a while, but I got off the Pepsi. People used to say they used to have to pay me to advertise the Pepsi because I always had to have my bottle there, you know. But I got off of all of that, and I'm eating what they tell me to eat. And so I'm trying to be a good girl with all of that. But they'll tell me if I'm not supposed to go somewhere. They can be very emphatic about it. One time they said, would you like protection? And I said, well, yeah, I can use all I can get. And they said, all right, if you're not supposed to go somewhere, we will not even allow you to go out the front door. Something will happen that you may think is bad, but it just means you were not supposed to go. And sometimes things have been canceled or things I can't go to somewhere, and I just said, well, I'm not supposed to do it. But they said, you'll always be protected if you listen to what we're trying to tell you. And I said, I can use that. And right after 9/11, I was supposed to go to Istanbul in Turkey. They had a first UFO conference over there. And I was holding my tickets. I hadn't got them. They were holding them. 3 times through 3 different clients, they yelled at me and they said, do not go to Turkey. It's too dangerous right now. Said, maybe later, but not now. So when I went home and was telling my kids, they said, well, you going to believe them? If you tell you 3 times, don't go. And so I just canceled the tickets. And then I found, well, that was right at the time we started bombing Afghanistan. It would not have been a good time for a white American woman to be going into that area, so they knew that, I guess. But it ended up that the conference was canceled anyway, because they said they didn't think they were going to get the attendance from Europe. But I don't mind if they're going to take care of me. I think that's fine. And they do it in all kinds of strange ways. But what began happening was, during these sessions, they would begin giving me information, especially toward the end. But then it began now that some of the sessions are information that I need. I still try to do the therapy, but they're going to get the information in there. I may be in England doing a session. Toward the end of it, they'll come in and they wait till we're through with what we're trying to do. And toward the end of it, they'll say, Dolores, this is the next piece of information you need for your next book. And they'll give me a theory that I've never heard of before. Then I go home. The next week, I'm doing a client in the States. Happens again, and they expand on the same theory that the first one has given me. Now, see, how can this be coincidence, random? Because none of these people know anything about what I do. I'm focused on them and their problems. They don't tell me anything about myself at all. But it keeps happening over and over again. I get a piece of information here and a piece of information there. And it's happening constantly now, and usually that's when I say, can I have a copy of the tape, because there's something on there that I need. And it may not be the entire tape, it may be just one piece of information that fits in with all the rest. And this is where the Convoluted Universe book series is coming from. These new theories and new things that they keep giving me. And I thought I had heard it all, but now they keep coming up with new things all the time. But they said, what I'm getting now, if I'd gotten 30, 20 years ago when I was first starting, I wouldn't have understood it. It would have been overwhelming. So they said you had to wait till the right time in your life before you could get this. They told me one time, it was about a client I was working with, they said, he is where you were 20 years ago. You have to give a baby milk and then cereal and then crushed vegetables. You can't give a baby a 3-course meal. You have to wait until the baby grows a little bit. So I said, over all these years, they've been spoon feeding me. A little bit of information, let you digest that, then a little bit more complicated, let you digest that, and then till it's got to this point where I keep thinking there isn't anything else, but it's getting more and more complicated. So I have no idea where it's all headed, but I have enough information now to write book 3 of the Convoluted Universe. And the majority of it has come from the clients coming to my office in Huntsville. It pours out of people. So it's just very strange information. Some of it is very hard to understand. When I wrote book 1, I told everybody that was a book for people who wanted their minds bent like pretzels, because I didn't understand it, and I said, if they want to tackle it, and they're telling me they love it, even though they don't understand it, it makes them think. And I thought they'd start at the easier books and then get down to that. But now they said they read book 2, and they say, when's the next one coming out? We want to keep thinking. We want to know this information. So, okay, I'm trying to figure out where I should start in this, because there's so much. I do lectures on so many different topics, but I know I want to get to the New Earth before we're finished anyway, because there's a lot of things happening right now they want me to tell people, because we're moving into a new time. But some of the things O.T. was saying were right on, because those are the things that you read the books, you know what he was talking about, the soul, and oversoul, and how we are splinters and all of this. I don't want to get too complicated for people. I like to stay at a level where I think they can handle it. And if you want to ask some complicated questions, I'll go into that. But I'm trying to keep it a level that I think most people can handle. Hopefully, anyway. Okay. But one of the things that I was going into, finding out a lot about, was dimensions. And I found out a lot about this when I was working with ETs, because I've been doing the ETs and the UFO abductions for 20 years. And I speak at just about every UFO conference in the world. And my information is positive. I have never found the negativity. And because I don't deal with the conscious mind where the fear is. I deal with the part of the mind that has the information. The other investigators, the other hypnotists don't do that. They stay with the surface conscious mind that has the fear. So when I'm doing, just a minute, I know how OT felt a while ago. The same thing happens to me. You have all this information flooding in, and you have to say, you're trying to keep up with it. That's what the ETs say. It's easier to do thought to thought instead of trying to do it verbally. Okay, but they said that it has to do with dimensions. Now, dimensions are around us all the time. We're just not aware of them. And in some of these dimensions, there are cities, there are people living, but we don't know about them. They know about us. The reason we're not aware of them is because they're vibrating at a different frequency. If you ever watch a fan blade or a propeller blade, when it speeds up, it becomes invisible. That's the way these dimensions are. They're vibrating at a different frequency, and that's why they're invisible. And there's thousands of these. Some people say, oh, there's only like the 4 dimensions, or maybe 5 at the most. I said, there are countless dimensions. They're thinking in the baby terms, the simple terms of the 4 dimensions that we're aware of. There's many, many more than that, because it's much more complicated than we can think of. Now, the ETs, the ones in the UFOs, use these dimensions to travel, because all they do is change the vibration of the craft to go back and forth between dimensions. So you don't need to have, like some investigators I work with want to know, what kind of fuel do they use in the craft to get from here to that star out there? And they're having the hardest time understanding it's not done that way. It's done with thought. And they go back and forth through dimensions. Rather like Star Trek, when they say, engage and Mach whatever, and they are there because they change the vibration, the frequency of the ship. And this is what they do. But I've done lectures on this. I'm not going to go into the whole thing about ETs. But they change the vibration or frequency, and this is how they appear suddenly into our atmosphere, and how they disappear just as quickly. Well, these dimensions are all around us, and we are constantly going in and out of these dimensions, and we don't even know it. This is all part of life. What OT was talking about a while ago, these strange things that happen, like the one who was almost off the cliff. And my brother-in-law, too, was almost hit by the car. I've had a lot of people emailing me with strange stories and wanting me to explain what's going on. I had one, we covered it in the session, one of her questions, because she said she was in Florida and she was out jogging, and this is in the city, on a city street. And as she was jogging down the street, she saw what looked like an airplane coming in to land, coming in among these palm trees. She could see the tail of the plane. It was a big plane. And she said, oh my gosh, there's a plane crashing. And so she ran all the way back to the house, turned on the TV so she could hear about the plane crashing. There wasn't anything. So she said, what happened? So that's one of the things she wanted to ask about during the session. They said what she was doing, she slipped into another dimension. And in that dimension, there was an airport existed there. But it didn't exist in her reality. Some of these dimensions, there could be different things like that, and we're not aware of it, unless something happens like that to get your attention. They talk about people walking down a street, and maybe they notice a beautiful tree that's there on the other side of the street. The next time they go down the street, there isn't any tree. You may have had some of these things happen to you. I had a girl that was in college, and she said she came out of her dorm, and they were doing construction on the street out in front of her dorm. And it was all tore up, and they had these orange cones and everything around. The next day, she comes out of the dorm. There's nothing, no sign of any construction at all. So sometimes these things happen, and you're not even aware of it. I had another person who was in came out of an apartment building. When he came down in the elevator, came out on the street, everything was the way it was 50 years ago. The cars, the buildings, the way the people were dressed. Nobody seemed to be aware of him, but it was like, oh my gosh, he was so frightened. They walked around for a while, and he finally went back into the building, and he got back in the elevator, went back up in the elevator. He was back in now. I wouldn't want to be stuck there, but who knows? This has to do with different dimensions, portals, or whatever it was. There's so many of these now that they're sending to me. But the one I think that really gave verification, it finally had proof. See, I've done the Art Bell show where you're on all night long, and that's the hard show to do because you have to talk all night. You've all listened to the Art Bell, I guess, haven't you? Around here, it's a little hard to get it, but it has something like 30 million listeners. And when I do that show, the first time that phone didn't quit ringing for 2 weeks. It rang all day and all night. And then it went into emails the next time I did it, and we had 400 emails a day. Has a tremendous readership, but it's on all night. So you have to stay up all night to talk and answer the phone calls that come in and all of that. So this one night I did it. Well, I began to get the emails. And this one lady emailed me, and she said, I hope you can explain what has happened. She said, because it's on all night, a lot of people don't stay up and listen to it. They have these tape recorders that will record hours and hours on one tape. I don't know what they call them, but they can turn on the radio and it'll record the entire show. They said, there was 3 friends. They all turned on the tape recorder, went to bed, and they recorded the show. The next morning, the one woman gets up, turns on the tape recorder, listened to the show. She finds out it wasn't the Art Bell show. It was a sporting event. She said, what's this? Well, we told everybody, turn off the phones. Because they said they create havoc with the sound system. Yeah, zap it. Okay, all right. I forgot to mention that again. Okay. What was that? Okay, all right. Okay. But they heard the call letters and they knew it was the right station. They called the station and they said, oh, we don't carry Art Bell anymore and we're not going to ever do it again. It was a sporting event. And so the woman calls her other friend and she said, yeah, that's what I got too. I got this sporting thing. What's going on? The third friend got the show. Same call letters. They knew it was the same station. Now, what happened? 2 didn't, and the other one did. And later she said, by the way, now they're carrying the Art Bell show again. But she wanted me to tell her what happened. But a week after I got the email, and I answered them, trying to answer the best way I could, I was doing a Unity Church lecture in Memphis. These people lived in Nashville. And they drove from Nashville, and they were 3 elderly ladies. Nobody's going to make something up. And they said, we came all this way to really tell you it did happen, and we have the tape recordings to prove it. Now, that's proof. Now, what happened? There were two of them in a dimension where the show did not exist, and the other one was in the dimension where we were broadcasting from. This is what a lot of these strange stories, things happen like this. So it probably happens to you and you just say, oh, I probably made it up or I didn't pay attention, these kind of strange things. One of the strangest one was this one man emailed me and he said, he went out to the airport watching the jets take off. He's watching the jet take off, takes off, and it goes backwards, and it goes forwards, and it goes backwards until it finally takes off. And he says, jets can't go backwards. And as he stood there watching the other planes, they did the same thing. Forward, backwards, forwards, until it finally took off. Then he went out in the clouds, were doing the same thing, back and forth in the sky. And he goes out to the sidewalk, the cars are going forward and backing up and going forward and backing up. And this went on for quite a while before it finally returned to normal. And he says, what was happening? I said, the only thing I could think of is maybe he was at a juncture of the dimensions where it was not solidified. I said, if anybody else has a better explanation, I don't know what it could be. But this is important to understand about the dimensions so you'll understand when I'm talking about the new earth. But I don't know if you can think of anything else or not, strange things like this. There's been all kinds of strange stories that I've been told. You know, people, you probably had it. Maybe you were at home and somebody will tell you they saw you downtown at a store or something. And you said, no, I was home all day. I've had many stories of things like that. And I was at one where we were doing a conference in Hot Springs, Arkansas, by the lake. And it was on the day that the gambling begins, the horse races. And this woman came to the conference and she said, well, I had a hard time making up my mind. I didn't know whether I wanted to come to this or go to the races because it was starting on the same day. So, well, I finally decided I'll come to the conference. So she was there all day. Well, we had a banquet that night, and these men came in for the banquet, and they saw her, and they said, oh, it's nice to see you again. They said, boy, wasn't that nice, all that money you won at the races? And she said, what? I've been here all day. They said, no, you sat next to us at the races. And she said, well, how was I dressed? She said, just like you are right now. And see, this is what I found. When you make a decision, you put energy, everything's energy. You put energy into these different decisions. We all do this. We decide, should we go here? Should we go there? Should we get married? Should we not get married? Should we take this job or not that job? You put energy into either decision. We decide, we'll do this. What happens to the energy of the decision you don't follow through? It creates its own reality. This is the things that are hard to understand. In that other reality, another you is living out the other decision. You got married over here, you got divorced over there, or maybe you had a different job, but you don't know about it because you're focused on this life. Imagine how confusing that would be if you did know all of these other things. But when I told the story about the woman with the racetrack, they always want to know what happened to the money. Because I said, I guess the woman in the other reality is the one who got the money. But we would never have known that if they hadn't have come in and told us about it. So there's a lot of strange things out there. And the people that tell me these things, they say, I can't tell anybody this. They're going to think I'm crazy. And they're sitting there telling me these things, and they said, you mean you're not freaking out? I said, no, I've heard it before. You're perfectly normal, believe me. So this is what I keep finding more and more about, these, what I call the alternate realities. And they said it's not quite as simple is making a decision to go here or go there. I'm giving this to you the easy way. I don't want to blow too many minds. Some of you may already understand all this. They said it's not just that. It means every time you make any decision to cross the street, to stay home, to get up and down out of a chair, every time you make a decision and you do one thing instead of another reality is created. So it splits again and again and again and again to where you have thousands of you living all these different kinds of realities. Now, they have said there's no way any of us can ever understand all of these things. It's absolutely impossible. They told me one time, all of your questions will never be answered because some information is as poison rather than medicine, because we couldn't possibly understand it in our frame of reference and it could cause too many problems. They said, in that case, we cannot give you the answers. We'll do what we can, but they said, it's not the brain, it's the mind. The mind does not have the ability to understand certain concepts. It's impossible. So they tell me little things that sometimes to me sound astounding, but they said we cannot ever see the entire picture until we cross over to the other side. The blinders are lifted, and then we can see it all, the entire thing. But there is so much out there that we don't know, and that's what I'm still searching for. I keep thinking, there's nothing that I haven't already heard, that I can't hear anything weirder than that. But then something else comes in. So I don't have any idea where it's going or where is it going to stop, if it will, because they said as long as I'm doing this, I will continue to find information. That's why I'm the reporter and the investigator and putting it all together. Okay, I was trying to think what part to go to next. There's so much that they have told me about. Okay. One thing that's amazing has been happening. It's in the books about the God source. And our concept of God is totally wrong. You know, Father Pat's sitting over here nodding, you know. We personify him. That's the only way the church can teach it, and the only way a lot of us can understand it is make it into a person. Have to put it into a physical form. This is our physical form. That doesn't mean everything else is physical. I've had people that are energy beings. And this, I believe, is closer to what O.T. was talking about. It's an energy being that is light, and it can create what it wants. But there's all kinds of different kinds of beings. Just because we're physical, this is not all there is, but it's all that some people can even comprehend. They can't understand anything more than what this is. But you've lived on other planets, you've lived in other dimensions, you've had energy bodies. There isn't anything that's out of the realm of possibility. Okay, so I began having more and more people going back to what they called the source. Instead of going into a past life, they went to the source. And I didn't know what it was at first, but now I'm hearing it so much that I recognize it. In the book I wrote about Between Death and Life, that told you where you go when you die and what it's like on the other side, I asked every question I could think of, and one thing I wanted to know was about God. Now, this was in the beginning of my work. They said, there's no way you can conceive what God really is. They said, your perception of God is like a tiny thread compared to what it really is. And then they said, consider other people who don't even have a metaphysical background. What their concept of God isn't even this tiny thread. But they said, God is the glue that holds everything together. If he were to wink out for a fraction of a second, everything would dissolve. It is that great of a power, and it's an energy power. And when I've had people go back to the source, first one woman said, I'm in the sun. And I said, what do you mean? She said, this is what it looks like. It's a bright, bright light, and I'm in the sun. Well, what's it like to be in the sun? I thought you meant the sun in the sky. She said, well, it's not hot. I think it's very beautiful. I don't want to leave. It's such total love. I want to stay here forever. And then it got down to, as I asked more and more questions, a lot of times they refer to it as the great central sun, which is the same thing as the source or God. It's where everything came from. And in the beginning, we were all part of God, all part of the source. And then when he exploded out, because he wanted to learn, he had a curiosity, he wanted to learn, he exploded out. This was the Big Bang theory. Then all these sparks flew out. And all these sparks became planets, galaxies, and individual souls. So that's when we all went out. And we were sent out to learn and to have experiences and gain as much knowledge as we possibly could through many, many lifetimes everywhere. And eventually, we could return to the source with all of the knowledge we have learned. And that way, we are cells in the body of God. We are learning and bringing the information back. And it can take hundreds and hundreds of lifetimes because you have to be everything. You have to accumulate all knowledge before you go back. But when they go to the source, there's such love, they don't want to leave. And when they're made to go out, they just said they feel so alone. Because there it's a total togetherness. And when they are shot out and go on and they have to do these lives and learn the lessons, they feel very alone and cut off from the central source. And all they want to do is go back. I'm getting a lot more people now in the sessions that have not had very many past lives at all because they go back to the source and they don't want to go out. They want to stay there. It was strange when I did this class I just did in Amsterdam. I always do a demonstration with the students on the last day to show them how the method works. Well, the one I did the demonstration on was a lady who brought me over there, and I was staying at her house. And she kept talking about, she thought she had a life as a ballerina and everything. Anyway, when I put her under, she went to the source. And I'm thinking, usually when you're doing a demonstration, you want it to be simple so they can understand it, because you don't want to get too complicated for them if you're going to figure they're going to use this method. You figure a normal past life regression. She went back to the source, and I kept trying to get her to move into a past life or something. And she kept saying, no, I don't want a body, I don't want a body. That I don't want that, I want to stay here. And finally then, I finally said, okay, let's move into Lilia's life and find a happy day, because I wanted to get her somewhere because she just kept crying, I don't want to go, I don't want to go. And so we was trying to get her back into Lilia's life, find a happy day. She said, don't want Lilia, don't want a body, don't want anything. And, really protesting, I don't want to go in a body. And, but I've been doing this long enough, you don't get scared, you know what to do anyway. So I kept talking to her. We went through the whole thing, finally got to the subconscious, and I asked it about it, and it said this was her first life. And she didn't want to be here. She wanted to be there because she said it's total love, and it was so beautiful, she didn't want to go. And I said, well, what happened to this past life she thought she had as a ballerina? He said, we thought it'd be a nice, beautiful picture and memory she could think about, but that she had never been in a body before, and that was why the protest. Then I said, well, this is unusual. I'm having a class here. I thought it'd be a past life. Why did you do this? They said, because these students are going to begin finding more and more of this. They better know now what to expect. And that's kind of like dumping a graduate course on beginners. But that's what it said. It's more and more of this happening, and it is happening more and more in my work, that we're not going back to past lives anymore. This has been going on for the last 2 years. A lot of the things I got on here I'm probably not going to be able to talk about. I will do the New Earth, though. But something strange has been happening. Usually they go to a past life, and that's what the therapy is. Instead, we're going to the source, or we're going somewhere else, and When I ask the subconscious, well, what about the past lives? They'll say, unimportant, unimportant, kindergarten stuff. Don't worry about the past lives. It's over, done with, the karma's dealt with. Now you have to think about now and moving on. And this is happening more and more. So it's not as simple as it used to be. Now, I don't know if that means all of karma has been dealt away with, or does it mean it's not necessary anymore? But I still get people who are working through karma, especially with family problems, so it's not all done away with. But I can have as many, I told my daughter, I had 3 enrolled that said the same thing. Just think about now and moving on. Don't worry about what happened in the past. They said, we could show it to you, but it wouldn't. What difference is it going to make? It's not important anymore. You have to get ready for the new earth and moving into the future. So I'm not going to go into a lot of these things because I want to go back with the new earth, and then I want to allow time for questions because I know there's a lot I haven't even touched. Especially with Atlantis. Well, I'll tell you a little bit about that anyway, okay? Because it's important. I've done a lot with Atlantis because they said it's important for us to know about. There were many, many civilizations that went to the height. We can't even imagine what they were at. We're nowhere near the way they developed. Atlantis was one of them that went to the pinnacle. They were able to do things with their minds that we can't even imagine. The civilization of Atlantis existed for thousands of years, and it was the entire world. It was not just an island out there. There was huge, beautiful cities, and then there were also natives and jungles. So they had it just like they have today. But the ones in the cities had learned how to use their minds to such a degree that they could do anything with it. They could mold stone and move stone. This is where the pyramids and everything were developed later, were by the survivors of Atlantis who still carried the knowledge of how this was done. They could move things. They could create things with their minds. They didn't have any more disease. They didn't grow old because they had complete control of their bodies. But they began to use the mind in the wrong way. They did a lot with crystals. They had a lot of colors they used. I've had many things, and this is a whole section in Convoluted Book 1 about what they were able to do. They had tremendous powers of these things with the minds. But after thousands of years, they began to do things they weren't supposed to. Can you imagine if you had the power to do anything with your mind? You'd get bored after a while, wouldn't you? Being human. And then you say, well, let's try this or try that, even though it wasn't really correct. And so they began to have some things that were corrupting the use of the mind. And they began doing things that were not right. One of the things that they began to do, which I was told was against the laws of nature, they began interbreeding animals and humans. And at first they were doing it to have them for servants, and it was for fun, you know, and just to see if they could do it or not. Majority of times the mutants, the things that they created, couldn't reproduce, but they were just trying different experiments. The legends that have come down to us from ancient Greece and ancient Rome about the half man, half animals, centaurs, minotaurs, the harpies, all of those legends originated in Atlantis. And I always believed a legend had to have a beginning somewhere. They come from the abilities they had in Atlantis to interbreed the animals. And it's come down to us in the form of legends from Greece and these different places. But it actually was done at that time. Then it began to abuse it. And they began to abuse the power of nature. And they said that was when they had to be stopped. They were doing things that were against nature. They were also trying to use the powers of the crystals to do negative things. They were creating too much power and directing them down into the center of the earth. And they were doing all kinds of things just to see if they could do it. And they were using the crystal powers in a negative way. This is why Atlantis had to go down, because they were doing things they were not supposed to. So it came to the point it had to be destroyed. Now, when I've been doing this, I like to ask questions about everything. And one of the interesting things is the Bermuda Triangle, when people ask me about that. I was told that when Atlantis went down, in the Bermuda area, there was a temple that had something you would call like a time machine, be able to go back and forth different dimensions. And it was located in that area. Well, when it went down, the machine was damaged. And so it's sitting there sporadically shooting out waves of energy, which is what caused these different phenomena you hear about in the Bermuda Triangle. That's why you can't predict it, you don't know when it's going to happen, and you can't control it. But it makes sense to me that it is these ancient machines that are still operating in a sporadic way. But also I found that it was not just Atlantis. There were many other civilizations that were highly advanced and disappeared. Just, man, I got a tickle there. Okay. There's one part in the book, I have a whole section about the different catastrophes that took place in these ancient times. And it always had to do, usually with the men wanting the power and having to control the power and using it in an evil way. And usually it was the women who were trying to use the power in a positive way and counteract what was happening, the good and the evil against each other. And oftentimes it just wouldn't work, and the evil would win out, and that was what caused these civilizations to go down. But in one, this group of women were in this temple, and they were trying to do these ceremonies to counteract the energy, because they said the other group had succeeded in burning a hole in the ozone layer. And they were going against the sun, and they said the sun was coming through and it was too much energy and it was burning the area. They were trying, the scientists who were doing it kept saying, well, they didn't think it was that bad, but it got out of control. And these women, with their ceremonies, were trying to stop it. And they said, we can't anymore, it's completely out of control. Well, it ended up that the whole area broke open and it burned the entire area. That is where the deserts are now in Africa, the Sahara deserts. They said it used to be tropical and beautiful, and it ended up turning it into a desert where nothing would ever come back and grow again. So they're doing this, trying to counteract it, and finally it all happened and they all died. And she's, in the spirit state, and she was saying, we have to go to sleep now. And I thought she meant they was going to die, just go into, because she was dead. And she said, no, the power is too great, even their power. We can't use it. It's going to have to go to sleep. Maybe in the future it'll be time when you can bring this back. But now the power, we've abused the power, it has to go to sleep for a while. And they said that's what's happening. And when she came back immediately into a past life, she was living in the desert, poor, and they didn't have any power at all. And what I think happened, they said it was like blowing a fuse. Imagine you use the power of your mind to the point where you get to that, it blows a fuse, and then it's better off not to allow you to have that power again because it's too much. So they said everything is going to have to start all over again to develop the same way, eventually to maybe get back to the point where they can use the minds in that way. But they said it would take a long time. One time they told me, we have allowed this power to come through 2 times. One time was at Atlantis. The second time was what you have in the Bible as the Tower of Babel. They said it's a simplified version of what really happened, but it was abuse of the power and to where it had to be scattered to where they couldn't use it. And if you look at it, they talk about the tongues, nobody could understand everybody. If you really look at what it's trying to say, even in a simplified version, it was a misuse of the power again, and it had to be taken away, everything start over again. They said, well, now we think maybe you can use it again. We're allowing it to come back little by little. And you're getting the powers back. And this is what we're going to be doing, is using our psychic abilities more. And they said, maybe this time you won't abuse it, maybe you will be able to handle it. We hope so, because it's time. They said, what's the use of starting all over again? Every time you destroy yourself and you start all over again. This is where the idea of the new earth is coming in. Because why start all over again? It takes thousands and thousands of years to get finally back to where maybe you can do these things and move on to the next level. Instead, we're a pretty stupid species, I guess. But a lot of it is the abuse of power. So they said, that's why the idea of the new earth is coming in. But they said, you're getting the abilities back now. Little by little, you're getting the psychic abilities back. I see people coming to me all the time that are either healers or they want to be healers. And a lot of them want us to start centers where they can do healing and teach healing. I see it as an undercurrent, because why do I get so much of this? Like I'm getting the people wanting to go in alternative healing. It's an undercurrent is happening here. And that's what I believe is going on, is that the healers are coming back. And that's what they keep telling me when somebody comes in. They'll say they're supposed to be working in sound therapy. They're supposed to be working in light therapy. They're supposed to be healing people. They never tell us your purpose in life is to go out and have a ball, go out and get drunk, or. They always say you're supposed to be here to help each other, and especially to do it with healing and these different abilities. So they're coming back, and I'm seeing more and more of it, especially with the children. So it's time. All right, I think I'm going to allow time for questions, but I want to tell you then about the new earth. This has been coming through so many of my people. How much time are we going to have on that tape? What time do you want me to stop?
25 minutes.
25, because he said that tape stops on the dot. That would be what, about 5 after, or on the dot? Okay, a little bit after 9. Okay, but otherwise the tape will shut off. Okay, I'll try to, huh?
I'll give you a high sign.
Okay, I'll try to. I haven't even touched a lot of it. Okay. We are finally getting to the point, rather than, they don't want us to destroy the earth. We have to go through this time right now, what I call the time of troubles, where the earth is working out its own karma. Then we're going to be moving into what is called the new earth. And it's going to be magnificent. It's going to be beautiful. Everything will be different. And it's just like in the Bible, where they say, we're moving on and some will be left behind. The book of Revelation is real. It's talking about the new earth. It talks about the new Jerusalem. That's what it's talking about, is moving into the new earth. But that's why I think this karma and things are being done away with, because it's not necessary anymore. But as we move into this new earth, the vibrations and frequencies are being changed, as I was told you a while ago about the dimensions, because the earth is moving into a totally new dimension. The frequencies and vibrations are speeding up. And it's the first time it has ever happened in the history of the galaxies and the universes. First time it's ever happened that an entire world will make the shift at one time. It happened in the time of the Mayans. That's what people always say, what about the Mayan calendar ending at the year 2012? The Mayans disappeared. They were only one group, there were others. The Mayans disappeared. They always say, where did they go? Well, when I was told, they reached this point of development when they didn't need to be on Earth anymore. So their frequency and vibration was changing. They shifted in mass as a civilization and as a group into the other dimension. They disappeared. But they were able to see when the next one would happen, when the entire world was going to make the shift into the next dimension. That's why their calendar stops at 2012 to tell us that's when the big one is coming. And I'm told the entire universes are watching because this is something that's never happened and it is tremendous. Time is speeding up. The vibrations are picking up. You all know time is speeding up. Everything is changing that way. The earth has a tone. I've heard this tone. They have played it because it is recorded from the space stations. The earth has a definite tone. That tone is going faster. It's changed its pitch. So the earth itself, they can tell something is going on, maybe with the vibrations and frequencies they can pick up with their instruments, because the tone of the earth is changing too. But the whole thing is vibrating. It's affecting our bodies. A lot of you, are you noticing things happening to your bodies that you can't explain? A lot of people talk about it. Sometimes they have things with their heart, they have things with their blood pressure, they have dizziness, they have things with their body, and they go to the doctor, and the doctor can't find anything wrong with them. It all has to do with the energy changing in the body, and the frequencies are changing, and our bodies are trying to adjust to it. That's why it has to be done slowly. You couldn't just suddenly do this. The bodies couldn't handle it. So our bodies have to shift with it slowly and adjust. And maybe you'll take one little jump, and at that time we'll feel something in our body. And then we have to have a time of adjustment before it does it again. Now, everyone, they talk about the ones left behind. Everyone's not going to be able to make the vibrational jump. And I said, that sounds cruel. He said, some will be left behind. I said, that sounds cruel. And they said, no, it's not. They all had the same opportunity as everybody else. They couldn't change their life. They couldn't change their way of thinking, their way of living. They aren't going to be able to change the frequency that quick. So they will be left with the old earth. And they said, it's okay. That's their choice and that's their life. Now, whenever they reincarnate, they'll be allowed to work out their karma here. They'll stay with the old earth where the violence and all these terrible things are still happening. And whenever they finish that life, they will not return to earth because earth isn't going to be the same anymore. It's going to be this beautiful paradise. So they will be sent to other planets that are still in negativity and violence to work out that karma. But he said it doesn't matter anyway. Everybody moves at different degrees of development. So it's not really cruel, but they're the ones that are left with the old earth. And as we begin to vibrate and move, we're moving into the new earth. They said, have you noticed your diet's changing? This has to do with this shifting, with effects on the body. They said, you will get to where you won't want heavy meat. The body has to become lighter to make the shift and go with it. You're not going to want heavy meat because heavy foods will hold you down and make you dense. You'll get to the point where you'll want vegetables and things, and they'll say eventually you'll want just liquids. It's all you'll be living on is the liquids because you won't want these heavier things as the body becomes lighter and being able to move in with this. But some people might like to eat these things, but they said this will just be a natural course of events that you'll feel like that. But then we move into this, and then eventually the earth moves into this new dimension, and the old one is left behind. I don't know if there's even going to be time for questions. Is that going to be okay? Because we don't want to run out of tape. Do you know Annie Kirkwood? She's the one who wrote Mary's Message to the World. And you don't hear about it anymore, but we are friends, and we used to do a lot of panels together. And on one of these panels, we were talking about the new earth and the earth changes. This was several years ago. She told about a vision she had that I think explains it very well. She said she saw the earth. And as she watched, the earth began to pull apart the way a cell divides, began pulling apart as though a cell is dividing until finally it broke apart and here were two earths. Over here on this one, she heard them saying, "We did it, we did it, we did it." Over here on this one, they heard them saying, "Poor thing, she died believing all that." They are not even going to be aware anything has happened. That's the strange thing. The ones over here who make the transition will know, but the ones here won't even be aware of anything has happened. They're still living their lives the way they've always been. And you know what was funny? I was giving this same lecture, I think it was in Laughlin, I don't remember which conference it was, and I explained, this is before Convoluted 2 came out, I was explaining this vision. This man wrote me later, he said, "The strangest thing happened to me sitting in the audience when you did that." Now, he said, "I'm an engineer, I'm a business person, I'm down to earth, solid, I've never had anything like this happen before. But as you were describing this vision," he said, "suddenly I was out in space. The auditorium disappeared, I was out in space. I saw the same thing you were describing as the earth pulled apart." And then he came back into the noise and everything of the auditorium. Well, he went on the computer and tried to recreate what he was seeing. And he sent us the computer picture, the one earth overlaid over the other one. And I got it in time to put it into Convoluted 2. He just said, put my name on it, don't let anybody know. But that was another strange thing. All of a sudden, he is out in space seeing the same vision that she was seeing. Strange, you know? But anyway, they said this is what will happen when it separates and we go over into this new part. But they said eventually, when you first go make the transition, you will keep your physical body. But it will be a place of total love, total peace, total acceptance. And as you're there, things will gradually begin to change after a while. You won't want food. You won't need a physical body. And you'll find your physical body altering to where you're eventually going to be an energy being. But this is the new earth is going to be totally different than the old earth. But they said the best thing to do is to go with it. But I get a lot of people saying, well, what about these other people that, my loved ones or whatever? What can I do to make sure they make the shift with me? They said it's an individual choice. You can't make anyone do anything. Whatever they decide is where they will be as we do this. One thing I thought was strange, it was in the book, I said, how is this going to happen with so many people doing this without them being aware of what's going on? They said, simple. We just put them all into suspended animation. And this is also in the Bible. A priest gave me the passages, and I quoted in the Bible. You remember it says, one man will be working behind, and one man will disappear, and the other one will be left working in the field. One person will be sleeping, and they'll be taken from the bed, and the other person will be left in the bed. Isn't that, I can't remember the exact, but there's several passages. I think it's in Revelations or something when this happens. One will be left, and the other will be taken. They said, we've done this before. They said, it's no big deal. We can do all these things. But they said, we just shut everybody down. And they go to bed. The next morning they wake up. They think it's the next morning. And actually it could be a whole week has gone by while they move the entire population into the new earth while the old ones are left behind. They said, we had to do it before. One time the sun needed adjustment. We shut the whole earth down so nobody would see what we were doing while we worked on the sun. And then when they woke up, they thought it was the next day, and they went on about their business, not ever knowing anything was going on. That's the people who, they won't know. They won't know the difference. Apparently, they're not going to. That's, even the Bible doesn't explain that, does it? It just says they go into, when they're taken, some will be left and some will be left behind. But anyway, that's what they said will happen. And they said they could move entire populations that way, and you'll wake up the next morning and go on about your business and won't even know the difference. But I think he said you will suddenly know everything around you is different. Things are better. They're brighter, they're happier, you've moved into a new world and you begin to feel different. But they said just go with it and don't look back. The other ones are where they have chose to be, where the violence will still be continuing, maybe the earth changes, the wars, but all of a sudden our world will be totally different. And this is going into the new world. So there's a whole lot more because I'm getting more and more information about it. I had a whole section on it in the last book. Now the information I'm getting too is that love is one thing that's going to help us raise our vibrations even more. To get away from the violence, just like Gandhi was saying, get away from the violence and focus on love. That's all Jesus was trying to tell us anyway. He was trying to teach us to love. And without that, there would be no wars, there would be no hatred, there would be no violence if we all learned to love everyone. It's a big deal, but they said that is one thing that they're telling me now will raise the vibrations even more of the frequency of the people. So I don't know, it's going to be very strange, but it's going to be very big too. I think maybe I better stop it there because I don't know of anything else I can add to that. And there's not really going to be time for questions. You only got about 5 minutes, this is going to shut off. So is that okay? I've tried to give you a lot. I know I haven't given you everything because I've written 13 books. There's a lot of information. I lecture for as long as a week in some places, every day a different phase of what I've got. Anyway, I think we'll stop right there then. Is that all right? Okay. Okay.